Wednesday, March 8th, meeting, it's 1 p.m. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Becca, can you take roll?
Director Cicada?
Here.
Director Thomas?
I'm here.
Director Davidson?
Here.
President Ratterman?
Here.
And Director Underhill is absent.
Okay, item 2 on our agenda is public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized items. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have any public comment today? Do we have public comment online? Anyone got their hand up? Okay. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our consent agenda. There's items 3A. It says 3D. I know it means 3B, 3C, and 3D. This is an action item.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Here we got a motion and a second. Becca, you take roll?
Director Cicada?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
President Ratterman?
Yes. Item 4 on our agenda is new business. 4A, presentation of the audited financial statements for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 22 by Richardson and Company. Jeffrey Myers, looking rather casual today. Good to see you, though.
Hello, Jeff.
Good to be here. Been way too long.
It
Good to
has
see you.
been way too long.
Hey. I've seen you for a while.
And my apologies for the casual appearance.
You look good. You look relaxed. That's what we should be when we're reviewing our audit. It's at the end of the audit period. And we're in the middle of our financial review, so
It's really cut and dry. It's easy
It-
reading.
it-
And I
it-
know it's one of Director Davidson's
mhm.
favorite topics along with the budget.
You can tell I didn't read my agenda because I wouldn't be here. The item before you today is the annual review. It's a receive and file of the 19, gosh, I've done this for way too many years, 2022 audited financial statements. Ingrid Sheplin, and I apologize if I butchered your last name, is our auditor. She's a partner with Brian Nash and Richardson and Associates. She will be presenting the audit to you, and then I will follow up with an item after this, staff's responses to their management letter. So we'll go through and identify those items. At this particular point, I want to turn it over to Ingrid and thank her for all her hard work. I also want to thank Catherine and Patty Christensen, who has helped us as well, because this was a long overdue process. And my apologies for being here in March for the audit. It should have been much earlier, but unfortunately I was out for a while and that delayed the whole process. So at this point, Ingrid, please feel free.
Okay. So I'll start by just saying why I'm here versus Brian Nash. As you're aware, the state requires the rotation of the lead partner on the audit. And Brian had been the partner on the audit for the previous 6 fiscal years. So we had to do a rotation this year to get a different set of eyes looking at the financial statements and your other data. So that's why I'm here today. If you would like to follow along, I think there's a 1-page summary or outline in your packet. And so if you could have that handy, I think that would be the easiest way. I don't know what page that's on.
Does anybody know what page that's
It
on?
is, it's in your,
It's
on it.
It's called the
It's in your
agenda,
handout.
right?
It's this one right here, the agenda.
Right after.
Okay.
That's it. Right there.
Did you put this agenda together or did they?
Ingrid put this
Got it.
together. This is her agenda and she's going to go through the whole
Awesome.
process.
Got it.
Got it all?
Thank you.
Okay,
Maybe that
Um,
would help if you could- excuse me, if you, and Rebecca show it online so the people online can see it as well? Can you do that, Rebecca?
Yes.
Just give us one moment, please. Oh, go ahead.
okay. What this outline is designed to do is just cover the various reports that are included in your packet at a very high level. And if you have any questions as I go through, please feel free to stop me. So the first item on the outline just lists the various reports that we issued as a result of the audit. First and foremost, we issue an opinion on the financial statements. We also this year issued a separate report on internal control and compliance as a result of the federal funding that was received during the year. Then we also issued 2 letters. One of them is a required communications or governance letter, and then a management letter with certain with recommendations. So the first item to go over is the independent auditor's report. And this opinion on the financial statements is considered an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements.
Can I
stating
ask
that-
you, I'm sorry, on this, on the unmodified clean opinion, can you give me an idea? Is that just meaning that you found no errors? I mean, you have recommendations, I see that, but explain unmodified. An opinion, I don't see how that opinion is, I don't understand what, I mean, opinions say, here's what we believe. What does it mean by unmodified? And sorry.
Yeah, so there's different, without getting too technical, there's different types of opinions that auditors can issue. So the best opinion that you can get is considered the unmodified opinion. If there's some discrepancies that we note that can't be overcome by making adjustments, which we did have adjustments, which I'll go over later in the presentation, but if there's some significant item that cannot be adjusted for during the audit process, then we would modify our opinion for that and include some qualification wording within the opinion. So the unmodified, even though it doesn't sound like it's a good opinion, that is the best opinion that you can get is the unmodified, indicating that we didn't have to make any modifications, and that it's basically saying that your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with government accounting principles.
Ingrid, I remember that question, great question, coming up several years ago, and got that answer, and it just sounds so unimpressive, unmodified and clean. And thank you for the question, Cindy. Could you go through the other, if it didn't say unmodified, what are the other options, which are much, much worse, of an opinion on how we're doing business here? But if you can go through just the other words that describe the other positions that you might have taken.
Yeah, so the next level down from, if we have to make modifications, then the next level down would be a qualification of our opinion. An example of that would be if, say you didn't maintain a list of capital assets, which is a large component of your financial statements. We would have to qualify our opinion because for that element of the financial statements, we wouldn't be able to issue an opinion. Then there's other ones that are adverse opinion is the next severe one, where there's some pervasive underlying issues with the organization that, or even we're limited as to, say, records, availability of records. To be able to perform an audit, we would be an adverse opinion. We haven't done too many of those, fortunately. There's most organizations are able to get their accounting records cleaned up so that we can either do a qualification or unmodified. And then the most severe is disclaimer, and that's pretty much that an organization is unauditable, that we really can't verify any information, and we disclaim an opinion completely. So those are the 3 variations. Unfortunately, the audit profession didn't come up with a word other than unmodified to make it sound good. But that's why I do put the word clean in there, because that indicates that that really is the best opinion that you can get.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Sure. There is changes in wording to that opinion. If you did compare that opinion that we have this year to last year, there's a lot more wording in there, and that's just because of a new audit standard that went into effect this year that required additional wording in there. So if you were to compare it and see that there's different wording, it doesn't mean that we issued a different type of an opinion. It's the same type of opinion, just different wording. The opinion also makes reference to a change in accounting principles, and that impacted your organization with regards to the cell tower leases that you have. And so there's a new line item that's described in note C of the financial statements that discusses the assumptions that were made. Basically, it's looking at your future payments that you're receiving under those cell tower leases, doing a present value calculation, and then recording those as a receivable on your financial statement. So that's a new accounting principle that went into effect this year, affecting your financial statements. So the next item on the outline is discussing the financial statements. I'm going to keep this at really high level. I just summarized in bullet form some of the more significant changes that you'll see in the financial statements if you were to compare amounts to last year. First item there is the restricted cash. That line item of your financial statements increased by $30 million. And that's because of the bonds that were issued in June of 22, just about a month before the end of the fiscal year. So there were proceeds that were sitting in your bank accounts that had not yet been expended. It's about $19.6 million in the water fund and about $10.6 million in the sewer fund that will eventually be expended down as those project expenditures are incurred. Most of it is invested in the local agency investment fund, earning some interest until those monies can be used. The next item is the new leases receivable that I mentioned. You'll see a new line item, both the current and the long-term portion, total $838,000, representing the present value of those cell tower lease payments. Then on the liability side, the new debt issuances caused an increase in your long-term liabilities of $30.9 million. Your pension liability decreased by $5.6 million. That liability had a noticeable change. It was $6 million last year, and it went down to only $422,000. But that's because of the unusually large investment gains that the CalPERS plan assets had as of June 30, 21. The measurement date used in your 22 financial statements in terms of CalPERS information is June 30 of 2021. As of that date, the market must have done extremely well, and that portfolio did extremely well. So what that does is it then reduces your pension liabilities. So that really wasn't anything the district did, but just really just a function of the market as of that point in time that those assets were measured. So this is causing quite a bit of volatility in your financial statements, and most likely will reverse out. I haven't looked at June 30, 22 to see what the pension assets look like. I don't know that information is available yet, but this could swing the other direction. What was that?
That's just a snapshot in time, though.
It is just a snapshot in time.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to point out through this presentation areas where we're seeing that fluctuation in your financial statements. And like I said, that could, if the market was down quite a bit then as of June 30, 22, then all of these gains that we're seeing on your income statement will reverse out and will end up being losses in subsequent years. So that was a large change. There was also a similar impact on your OPEB liability, but not quite to the extent as the pension liability decrease. So the unrestricted reserves, which are basically funds available for future use, for the water fund, it was 8 million. The sewer fund still had a deficit of 1.8 million. So the water fund went from it was about a $3.5 million change in the water fund. Most of that is because of that reduction in the pension liability. Because that pension liability decreased, it caused a credit amount to your pension expense on the income statement side. So a significant portion of that increase in your reserves is because of that pension adjustment. The sewer fund deficit was 3.7 million last year, went down to 1.8, and that's about almost a $2 million change, but about 1.5 million of that is because of that pension adjustment.
Will that also be affected June of 22 potentially?
Yeah, and like I said, I don't know. I'm assuming that the market was back down again at June 30 of 22. So yes, that could reverse back out. So just want to let you know that you're seeing increases in your reserves this year, but those could go back down as if that pension liability goes back up again, which is fairly likely that will happen.
Can I ask Jeff a question real quick?
Yes.
On these funds, and correct me if I'm not putting it together right, but these used to be combined and we had to separate them, right?
Well-
And if we did we kind of audit to make sure, the credits and debits were posted to the proper fund,
Yes, certainly. We've always had the water fund and the sewer fund,
separate?
but separate. But what we also had was a general fund, Fund 101,
Okay.
which we booked a large number of our expenses there, whether it's payroll or AP, services and supplies. And then at year end, we would split it.
Okay.
And when Ingrid was talking about some things to look at, journal adjustments, prior years, in 2021, we had 41 year-end adjustments they had to make. This year, it's down to 17 because we've been cleaning it up. Part of that was splitting out 101 and getting rid of it. When we went through the process, originally when it was done, the way they split the allocation went to all funds, even restricted funds, like expansion funds, capacity fees for Copper Cove Water, Copper Cove Sewer. The auditors looked at that and said, no, we can't move any of the assets or liabilities within, and this is basically a cash, from 101 out to restricted funds. So we reversed all that. Patty and Catherine worked with Brian and her auditors and went through a new distribution allocation of 101. They reviewed it. They signed off on it. I signed off. It was implemented and it was part of this audit.
Yeah.
So we went through that split and the resulting was, as you can see, there's, as she said, it's a truer indication of what's in the water and sewer fund, but it had the PERS adjustments that were needed to be made really clouds the picture when you're looking at these audited financial statements. As Ingrid said, when you're looking at benefit costs, what's in the balance sheet now is really not a true reflective of the actual money that we spent. Sort of what Director Davidson was saying, it's a snapshot in time. We still had to expend all that money for PERS and everything else. It just got affected on the balance sheets, which in turn affected the year-end balances that she was talking about. And as we unravel this 101 into 300, 500 moving forward, it's going to be a much cleaner process for the audit process. and for us to manage month to month to month.
That's what I thought this was, but I wanted to hear it.
I want to ask a question or just a clarification. When we're talking about unrestricted reserves, and like for instance, the 1.8 million deficit in sewer fund, we're not talking about capacity fees or expansion fees.
Correct.
This
Those
is
are the
completely
restricted.
separate, a completely separate thing. This is
Yes.
unrestricted.
Correct.
Yeah.
Unrestricted is Fund 300, Fund 500, the water fund is 300, 500 sewer fund, and some of the other fund, if anything, I think it's in 108, the interest reserve fund. But everything else, capacity fees, expansion fees are all restricted. Am I correct, Ingrid?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Ingrid. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to the statement of revenues and expenses. There you'll see a line item, salaries and benefits, that decrease substantially. And 5.5 million of the decrease is because of those credits that reduce the pension liability. So yeah, as Joe pointed out, it'll show, if you look at the benefits costs, there's a significant reduction, but it is just because of this accounting entry, not because you weren't paying what CalPERS required. It's just the accounting adjustment. When the liability gets reduced, it results in a credit in expense. So that's the reason for the significant decrease in salaries and benefits. Also want to point out that investment earnings is negative on your income statement, and that's because of the unrealized losses. And again, this is a snapshot in time, but as of June 30th, 2022, both the local agency investment fund as well as your investments in Chandler were all had mostly unrealized losses. So those are reflected. Again, they're just paper entries or unrealized losses. If you were to look at the market today or at your year end June 30, 23, most likely those would be back up again. But again, just a snapshot in time as of June 30, 22. So when you look at the net income of the funds, your water fund had a net income of 5.8 million. Out of that 5.8 million, the pension adjustment caused 3.6 million of that net income. So there's still net income of the fund, but a majority of it's the pension adjustments. The sewer fund showed a net income of 2.6 million. The pension adjustment caused about 1.5 million of that net income. So again, the sewer fund would still have had about $1 million of net income, but these numbers are just inflated because of the pension adjustment. Then to discuss some of the footnotes, footnote D shows the various capital acquisitions and other activity in your capital assets. It shows that you had about $10 million of capital expenditures during the year. Most of that was for the meter replacement, about $3.5 million for meter replacement, $1.5 million for a tank replacement, and about $800,000 for vehicle purchases and various other project expenditures. Note E is the footnote that talks about your debt. There was 19.8 million of water bonds issued in 22 and 11.1 million of sewer bonds issued. Those bonds are payable over 20 years and are at rates of right around 3%. Note I to the financial statements talks about your designations that or reserves that were established by board policy. The table does show that the approved reserves for the water fund are 11.4 million, but when you look at the available reserves that we talked about up under the previous section of the outline, the $8 million. So really the amount that you have in reserves or on paper is more than what you actually have in available reserves. However, their cash balances, when you look at it purely on a cash basis and look at reserves from a cash standpoint, the cash is there, but when you look at your equity, it's not sufficient to cover the amounts that you have set aside in reserves, mostly because of those long-term pension and OPEB liabilities that are recorded. Similar for the sewer fund, it's showing reserves set aside by board policy of about 2 million. And as we saw, when you look at the full accrual reserves, it's actually at a deficit of 1.8 million. Then note J and K discuss the various assumptions related to pension and OPEB. Talks about the actuary evaluations. The pension liability is calculated by the CalPERS actuary. The OPEB, or the acronym for other post-employment benefits, basically the healthcare benefits. Those numbers are calculated by an actuary that's hired by the district, and there's evaluation performed every couple of years on that. So that those footnotes have a lot of information about various assumptions that went into developing those estimates. The debt coverage ratios are also disclosed in the financial statements on page 54 and 55. The bonds require that the district maintain net revenues, a ratio of net revenues to debt service of 1.25. And the district far exceeded those required levels for both the water and the sewer bonds. So you're in compliance with the bond coverage ratios. The next report I'd like to discuss is the report on internal control and compliance. So as part of our audit, we review the internal controls and processes. And the reports indicate that we noted no material weaknesses in internal controls. However, we did identify, or just there's one carryover deficiency related to the number of audit adjustments. Although the number of adjustments has been reduced significantly from 17 or from 44 last year down to 17 adjustments. So we'd like to get that a little bit lower so that we can remove that control deficiency. As part of the, did someone have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Ingrid. Sorry.
Okay, I thought there was a pause. So
There was movement. There was movement on the dais. We're alive.
Okay. So as part of the, because of the federal grant funding that the district received, totaling about 4.9 million, we also had to audit for compliance with laws and regulations related to those federal grant funds. So the reports in there indicate that we noted no instances of non-compliance. The federal funds that we tested this year for compliance was the 3.7 million that was received for the meter replacement project. So that that's a clean report on compliance. The next item is the required communications letter, also titled governance letter. That letter has various items in there that we're required to disclose to you. One of the items discussed is the areas where significant estimates were used in the financial statements. Those are listed, but the most significant one that I've already mentioned is the pension and OPEB liabilities. Can be quite volatile, as we could see this year. And so those numbers are constantly changing and can have a significant impact on your financial statements. The letter also discusses areas where we made adjustments or changes to your accounting records. There were 17 adjustments. The list was provided to management so that they can be reflected in your books. And again, that's a significant improvement compared to the 44 adjustments we had last year, and similarly large number of adjustments in the previous few fiscal years. So So it's getting back in line with kind of what we would expect as far as the number of adjustments during the audit process. This letter also indicates that we had no difficulties in performing the audit. Staff was cooperative, provided the information that we needed during the audit process. The audit was somewhat delayed, as Jeff had indicated, not just with his absence, also staff turnover, as well as implementation of the new accounting system. So there was just a lot of factors that went into the delay, but I think overall, the district did a good job as far as being able to reduce the number of adjustments during the audit process, and pretty much had things cleaned up prior to us starting the audit. The last document I'd like to discuss is the management letter. And this letter indicates that the items that we listed in this letter are not considered to be material weaknesses, but just recommendations and other observations that we made during the audit process. Some of these are carryover items. We did have a comments last year in the area of policies and procedure recommendations. There were just 2 new ones added to that list this year. One of them is having an actual whistleblower policy, and the other one is ensuring that the board review the investment policy annually to comply with the government code. These other 2 recommendations related to the internal loan repayment and splitting out some additional joint cost funds are items that were in last year's letter that will still need to be addressed and resolved. So overall, that's a summary of the audit process. I do want to thank Jeff, Catherine, Patty, all the staff that contributed to the audit process and provided all of the documents that we needed during the audit. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions from Dave? Anyone?
I'm good.
Directors?
I just have one thing that I'd like to clarify. Ingrid, you explained very adequately the how the 6 or 5.6 million income on the pension plan, or the result of the investment, or the value of that going down. But when you go over to item or page 16, that's called the statement of revenue and expenses, changes in net position. I kind of.
Let us get there.
Hmm?
Let me get to that. Page 16, you said?
Page 16, yeah. What I began looking at last night was the 3 million of net income loss, 3,179,000. I mean, that was only 3 million because of this 5.6 million. Okay, that the $5.6 million adjustment because of the anticipated income, or I guess the change in value of that liability. But what concerns me, the 3 million net income loss got my attention. But if you put the 5 million back into that expense line, then it becomes 8 million of operating losses. All right, operating expenses are exceeding revenues by 3 million on this one, on this report. But if you take out that previous adjustment, is that something that as a board member I should be concerned about?
No. So you're looking at the net loss from operations row, which just to point out that number is before property taxes and other income. So the numbers that I pointed out in the presentation were in the line item change in net position, which is positive. But so to get back to your question on the, so the reason why that's a loss of if you look at the total column for both funds, 3,179,000, the pension adjustment is affecting that line item salaries and benefits under operating expenses. So if it weren't for that pension adjustment, your salaries and benefits would have been $5 million higher. So your net loss from operations would be 8 million. But if you look, that is comparable to what it was in 21. So really the 8 million loss from operations, the 8 million is probably a more realistic number than the 3 million that we're seeing this year, but it doesn't include the, like I said, the non-operating revenue category on that page also contributes to your operations, but from an accounting standpoint, it has to be shown as non-operating. So I don't see that net loss from operations is being alarming and to be of concern, because you need to look at kind of the overall picture. The other item to point out is that this statement does include depreciation of about 5 million. That's not, again, it's a paper transaction. And if you look at from a cash standpoint, you've already paid the cash out when you purchased or constructed the items, and now you're depreciating those assets, and that's hitting expense as well and contributing to that loss from operations. So kind of a long response to your question, but
I remember that mystery in accounting in college that depreciation is a source of funds. That's it always kind of threw me a little bit, but anyway, thanks for that explanation. I don't know whether that makes me feel better or worse, but
Neutral, stay neutral. All right, any other questions here? I wanted to just to say thank you, Ingrid. It's good to see a new face given this presentation. Not that the old face was getting worn out. I only see him once a year. But
how are you going to talk yourself out of that one?
no, thank you very much, and for the explanation of the of how the management letter works.
Yeah.
And on item 4A, do we have any public comment before we move on to the management letter? Is 4B is what we're going to be talking about here in a
Do we have
second.
to accept this or anything?
Just receive and file for the, yes, you just need to accept it.
By board?
By a motion? Is this an action item? Doesn't appear to be.
It just seems like we usually have to accept these.
Yeah, you just have to accept it.
And this was for 4A.
Does it take a board?
Does it take, how is it accepted? And we do have a public comment in a minute here, but how is it accepted by the board, Michael?
Just by motion.
I'll
Oh,
make a motion to accept.
I move to accept the review of the 20, no, that's different. I'm reading a different page. Of the audit report.
I'll second that.
here we got a motion and a second. We'll take the vote here in a second. We do have public comment.
Unmodified seems to be a good word.
Great. All right, thank you. Any other public comment? All right, you take roll call?
Director Cicada,
Yes.
Director Thomas,
Yes.
Director Davidson.
Yes.
President Ratterman.
Yes. And thank you both for that. And Ingrid, I'm assuming you're hanging around for the
Yep.
management letter? Okay,
Yes.
item 4B, discussion regarding the audited financial statement and management letter for fiscal year ending June 30th. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, the item that is before you is our response, staff's response to the management letter. And what we're looking at here is going through item by item through the management letter and identifying those items that require a response. And one of the things that, excuse me, I have my paperwork all jumbled in, is that we don't disagree with any of the findings. And what we have started to work internally is how to respond to those findings and implement the suggested or recommended action. We do have some limitations, and I'll just talk generically at this point. We do have some limitations with our systems that we have. some of the payroll systems that they identify here, approval. Once we implement the new HR system, some of these issues will go away. The same as when we implement finish up the UV billing systems and the financial system. So in those terms, it's more of a process when we're looking at things like cash receipts and payroll disbursements. But when it comes to other items, finding 3, payable and wire transfer procedures, we just need to tighten up and record our procedures. And when we're looking at whistleblower policy, there is no policy at this point. We have a fraud policy. So now we're going to look at writing up a whistleblower policy. The investment policy, that's on me. We should have brought it to you at the end of fiscal year 22. We're going to bring it to you for review. I'm going to send it out to our investment people, Chandler Assets, make sure they have a chance to review it. They tend to be more up to date on all the state rules, the changes in them. So we'll bring back that to you before the end of this fiscal year for approval. The internal loan, that's on me. I forgot that we needed to do that as part of last year's closing process, fiscal year 22. We'll get that corrected. And the other item that we have is, and I think Director Cicada touched on this briefly, is about Fund 101 split. We're trying to make sure we have the ability to track very cleanly water 300, sewer 500. We just need to take that a step further into Fund 104 and 108. Fund 104, and I know Cindy loves and Scott love all our fund numbers. Fund 104 is our admin fund. It's where a certain portion of our capacity fees go into a collective pot that is used for building improvements. We just need to split that out and say X amount is for water, X amount is for sewer. There's maybe some sub accounts. The same way with the interest reserve fund, which is where we have all our reserves, the 90-day reserve, the water rights, all that kind of money. We'll just have to do some better accounting to show them where they are actually split 300, 500. So we don't have to go through these adjustments that she's talking about at year end. So we can drive down our number just and see.
What's that ratio gonna look like? Because clearly, I mean, we've got, 13,000 something water, 5,000 something sewer, but the sewer income is much higher because it's about, it's quite a bit more per month. How do we get to that ratio?
We've looked at it a couple different ways. The most stable and easiest way to look at it is the number of accounts. And I've tracked this since 2008 when I first came on board. It's been very consistency. When we look at the total number of accounts, water, sewer, 73% of our accounts are water, 27% are sewer.
What's the income ratio, the difference?
It is different. And I don't have that number in front
But
of me.
I'm only smart enough to figure out 2 ways to do this, the way you're talking about it, and then the way I'm thinking about it, which is total revenue. So have we thought of the total revenue, water and sewer? Because, the sewer is, always lagging behind.
Actually, Catherine and I had that discussion this morning, looking at maybe on the revenue side, but we have to be kind of careful because on the water side, we have.
On the revenue side, you gotta do it on the distribution.
Yeah,
side, right?
we do it. Now, there's some revenues that are strictly water and strictly sewer. So those dump into the buckets. The other revenues that are specifically under the non-operating revenues, that's where we use that 73-27 split. When it comes to rates coming in, and the work, it's all based on which fund it falls in.
Right.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm wondering real quick though.
Sure.
With what you just talked about, do we as a board want to talk about the way that we want them to do that? Or does that matter?
Well, I mean, certainly
Is it a discussion?
like to know what they come up with.
I remember, we've been discussing this for years on how those two and what the proportion of, and I don't mind discussing it again. But Jeff brings up,
How about in finance?
What
Yeah.
we're talking about is putting it into those funds.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, are we putting it into those funds at the right ratio if we're just doing capacity?
Can we?
Because they are different numbers. So it's just something, it'd be nice to get staff's opinion when you figure that out.
Sure. And like I said, we've used this split since 2008. Maybe it's time to revisit it. But to just to reassure everyone, on the revenue side, everything in the operating side, the operating revenues that you were pointing to, Director Thomas, about what's above that line, that's all direct charges and buckets that it goes into. There aren't the splits there. The splits are in the non-operating.
And so can we just make that an agenda item at some point on the finance committee to talk about if that's the way that we want to continue?
Sure.
There you go. Hey, and while we're talking about this, and again, I don't know that we're not the only people doing this. There's a lot of other districts in this state that do both water and wastewater. How are their books looking? And we got the auditor right here in the room that I know we're not the only district that you've ever worked with or that your firm's ever worked with can you throw something into this equation as to how those percentages and proportions are looked at elsewhere?
Yeah, so there's actually a number of agencies that we work with that have this very same issue where they had the water, sewer, and then they had administration funds. I don't know if it's one person. It tends to be all the districts that we've audited kind of up in the foothills area. So I don't know if it's one consultant 50 years ago that got everyone set up the same way, but so yeah, from an accounting standpoint, since that admin fund doesn't get reported, it has to be allocated out. We have some agencies that are still reporting the separate administration fund, and then they do a split at the end of the year to split it between water and sewer, similar to what you guys used to do. Those percentages, they've been using percentages, same percentages for a number of years. Finally, they had a consultant come in and do a study to help them determine those percentages. And ironically, the percentage that they're using were not that far off from what the consultant had recommended. So it might be something, if you're concerned about the percentages that are being used, is to have a consultant come in and evaluate or come up with those percentages to use.
Well, again, if I'm saying what we're talking about is the money that goes in from rates into the administrative category. And how that's split up, am I wrong?
No, so rate revenue, I don't think is part of the.
This is the
Those are only dedicated to water or sewer. I think for the most part, we're talking about is
Yeah.
non-rate revenue.
Property
and then on the
taxes.
Expense side, that the ratio comes into play there as well. So
Yeah.
for a lot of items,
capacity fees, taxes,
those are all, the capacity fees are restricted and dedicated to particular funds.
but there's
Taxes,
isn't there a portion that goes into the admin on capacity fees?
Only in that admin building fund. It's like $100 per capacity fee. Everything else, but as Michael was stating, the restricted funds, if it goes into Copper Cove sewer, 100% goes into Copper Cove sewer. It's not split anywhere. It's only in let me back up a second. Under revenues, you have operating revenues and non-operating revenues. As I may not have been clear before, but operating revenues goes directly to those particular funds. Water rate revenues goes into water funds, sewer, and so forth, all the way down, late fees and all those kind of things. It's only when you get into investment income, property taxes, cell phone leases, those type of things, that we have been using that 73-27 split.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it may make sense to have somebody come in and take a look at it. We've talked about different ways, and I'm open to any and all suggestions.
Let's bring this back to the finance committee, and then it'll come back to the board eventually on what's decided. And I don't know that we want to spend a lot of money on a consultant to tell us how to split our money. And we're just talking about funds. Yeah, there are different ways of doing it and ways that may benefit us. I know what Director Davidson is getting to is that the sewer fund has less money. Is there a way of getting more money into it to help out the district as a whole? So
Right.
Yeah.
let's discuss that. And as far as the rest of the stuff on this agenda item goes, I'd like this 4-page document to be speaking of future agenda items, to be on and in the package for the finance committee for at least the next 4 or 5 months. And then a quick discussion on which of these items we've already checked off and which of these, and this is great. This is a management letter is the best thing we can get out of the money spent for this audit. Number one, that fancy word that tells us we're doing good, which isn't very impressive is the first thing. But the second thing we get out of this is what can we do better next year?
Mhm.
And then along with that, if we could get a spreadsheet, like an Excel spreadsheet with these items on it and just, to show how we've addressed them.
So-
Or maybe just making this a living document and expanding it out to each one of those categories instead of having two. However, whatever makes sense to you guys in the financial department. But these, I don't want to, some of these things we can address and click off and be good at. And
Understood.
the other ones, we just are not going to be able to ever do anything on them.
And we strive to get better. There's a lot of things that we've talked about internally. And part of it is just managing the flow of documents and everything that we're doing. But now we've got processes in place, and I really want to, again, thank Catherine and Patty to really putting these processes in place, and figuring out how Tyler works and how we could coordinate all these efforts. And we're getting much cleaner each and every month. We even are attempting to improve the budget status report.
And that's right, with fun names.
I was trying to, yes,
Thank
yes.
you. I heard that on the engineering thing.
Yes, I was trying to wink at Director Cicada because I know this is one of her items. But yes, we strive to get better. There's always room for improvement, and we will continue to report out on this responses to the management letter.
Any other comments on the management letter from up here?
Do we have to accept it or is it just?
Accept
No.
it.
I don't think so. Any public comment on the management letter? Anything online, Becca? Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Good to see you in the building.
Yeah.
Thank you.
it is.
Stay
Yeah.
here, stay around for a while.
Yes, I intend to. Thank you.
Okay, item 4C, Damon's up.
I'm sorry.
Jeff? Hey, Jeff?
Russ, or,
Yeah, this doesn't have to do with the management letter, just a question that popped up when I was reviewing all this stuff. But we have a $77,000 loss on the sale of a capital asset or capital assets.
what
period.
page?
Back on 16.
We didn't appreciate that.
We sold it at a price that was less than the book value or something.
Okay, give me a second, and there's actually an explanation for
Still on
that in the
16.
MD&A. I want to make sure I don't misquote it. If you, let me see if I can find, when we did the meter installation, we took out all the old meters.
Mhm.
We had to sell those, but it's really just an adjustment in book value on those meters. So the loss was taking those old meters off the system. And we actually recorded a loss on that because of the book, just happened to be the book value that we had from the assets of all the meters in the ground.
It
Those
was
meters-
higher than the sales price.
Yeah,
But the meters have been in the ground for 50 years, so.
not all of them. So we have them depreciated, but not all meters have been in the year in that long. That's the main genesis of why we took a loss on that.
But we had a $28,000 gain on the sale of the scrap. So that's been, I apologize for
Sure.
picking the.
No.
out of it.
You gotta do it some way.
And I apologize for not finding the right place in my MD&A. I will follow up with you on the details on the numbers of that.
It's probably the case that they're gonna melt down and make that bronze that they.
We'll make it an equestrian. Equestrian mounted bronze, okay. Oh,
Offline, talk to them about it.
thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay, now moving on to a review of fiscal year 23-24 District's 5-year capital improvement program update. Damon.
Good afternoon,
Dave.
President
Hi,
Ratterman,
Damon.
directors.
Oh, boy.
Yes. So here before you is an update to the 5-year CIP. I just want to acknowledge the considerable work that was completed by the engineering department and other departments in order to take a look at the projects on the CIP and really work to address the update in consideration of the current rate study that we're under. And really what you find in the update to the CIP is now a focused group of water and wastewater projects that really kind of start now. So for the next 5 years, we're really focusing on projects that are in design or in construction currently, with a few exceptions. So some of the projects that are in construction now, namely the Copper Cove Lift Station projects, there's 2 of them on here. They have project numbers here, 15076 and 15080 on page 28. There's so many different names for these projects. I just call them the Copper Cove Lift Station projects, but they're going to take place over this fiscal and into next fiscal. So, and then to kind of highlight some others that are on this list, the Arnold's Secondary Clarifier Improvements Project. That project's at 100% design. We'll have a bid-ready set of plans here within the next month or so. So that project will go to construction. Some others that aren't necessarily in construction yet are all of the Copper Cove water and wastewater projects. I call them all because they're quite comprehensive group. For the Arnold water side, we have a clear well that's in design. So we'll end up having 2 clear wells at the water treatment facility. We're rehabilitating tanks at our tank B site. And then we'll have a B to C transmission pipeline. There's a bottleneck between the current transmission pipeline from the B tank to C tank. And this will then convey water to C tank from our clear well, which will eliminate that bottleneck. So these are in design. They'll move to construction and they'll be in construction for the next 5 years. Some of the projects that you won't see on the 5-year CIP, which may have been discussed in the past, are West Point, McCulmy River, Middle Fork Pump Station replacement, rehabilitation projects, the Middle Fork Transmission Line replacement project, a Sheep Ranch Water System replacement, and Bummerville Reservoir cleaning, AKA the regulator. But really, it's the Bummerville Reservoir.
We can't go backwards.
Yes, exactly. And so this document is really, like I said, in consideration of the rate study and really focused to address the projects that we have in design and construction with the staff that we have and the consultants that we have currently on board. It's lean, it's very lean. You will hear from the engineering department that there are a whole host of other projects that could or should at some point in time, finances provided, make it to the CIP. And so what we have is another list of projects where those projects live, and a concerted effort. It's always ongoing. You should know that as a board, but it'll continue to be ongoing, is the search for grant funds and other sources of funding to see those projects to construction. So go ahead.
So, thank you. You've got them all separated by district. So that's all.
That's thanks to Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to Director Skate.
Okay, you're welcome.
No, you.
And so you narrowed it down and removed some because of the rate study and.
So I think I think Damon did a good job of explaining it, but really what we're trying to do is separate out what was already a narrow list of really just the most critical projects, and a very painful, difficult process with the engineering department and operations staff of going through and actually taking projects off that we know are critical that need to get done. But that we're just going to have to commit to finding other sources of funding for it. You know, we're, as we've discussed at the last board meeting, you know, we've kind of slowed the rate study process down a little bit, in part to make sure we didn't still have moving pieces between this and the audit that are, you know, key inputs to that process. And so just kind of in taking all of that into consideration, narrowing this down to what we, are projecting might be feasible to fund. And then the other projects are still just as critical. To push out tank rehab projects, to push out, Hunter's Clear Well. There's just a whole host of projects that keep us up at night because they are at risk of catastrophic failure and interruption in service that are not funded in this CIP. So we are going to have to go out and find other sources of funding because those projects are still critical.
And the ones that are in the update, they're going to be started using some of that bond funding, correct?
So we identified specific projects to use that funding for, and those projects are already underway.
Okay, and they're in this.
Yes.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And this update was presented to the engineering committee on the 28th of February. So,
I remember hearing,
yeah.
couldn't say anything.
Director Davidson?
Yeah, no, I have a couple questions. I was, obviously at that engineering committee and kind of glossed over a lot of that stuff, but I've got some concerns. What's the catastrophic possibility of failure at the West Point Wilseyville consolidation project?
So
Grant funded.
that wasn't
Is there a
necessary.
timeframe?
Yeah. It's under.
It's in construction, yeah. And so that's it was more of a hygienic, rather than catastrophic failure. That project was more associated with hygienic processes that needed to
Just
be
opportunity,
implemented.
grant
Yeah.
opportunity and.
Well, we had to eliminate the open cesspool that was the Wilseyville waste treatment facility.
Regulatory compliance.
I have a concern with lock antenna. I've been by the pond here lately and it's pretty full.
Yeah,
And the golf course is inundated and we've got, 6 more inches of rain coming this week.
Mhm.
What's the capacity of the infrastructure at La Cantena? And because I'm also concerned, we approved several developments, really the only ones in the county that I'm aware of were approved in La Cantena service area. The one actually wasn't in the La Cantena service area, but the one across the street from La Cantena.
yeah.
Yeah, that was never in our service area, but we approved it. I forget how many.
156.
Yeah, and so then we got the school.
Yep.
Coming up. We've got a full treatment pond.
Mhm.
So I'm concerned that, look, some of these that we're throwing off, I'd like to know where we are in capacity, like La Cantena, which one did we?
So we have the design for the lock antenna BioLac, which is the treatment process. We have that in design for 23, 24, but you're right, there's
No,
no
it isn't.
implementation for construction.
It isn't.
It should be.
It's 24, 25.
Oh, yeah, my mistake. Yeah, 24, 25, right.
And now, that would be paid for with capacity fees. We don't have, how much do we have in capacity fees?
Well, so I'm not sure about fees, but we do have the available capacity currently to serve the Jenny Lind Elementary School and the North Vista Plaza development.
Gold
And-
Creek 3?
And Gold Creek 3 should it become accepted. Now, that will put us pretty much at capacity for all of those. If all of those were to come online as one tomorrow, we would be at capacity. So
Where else do we have a situation where we've approved things at capacity, and will that prohibit us from approving any other developments? I know our motto is, first come, first serve, but, I can assure you, if we ever, while I'm here, if we ever issue a, moratorium because we didn't
Right.
work, then
Yeah, understood. Yep.
I
get
probably
it.
won't be here, but I can assure you other people won't be here either.
Yeah, no, I got you. Yeah.
So I'm just concerned, we've overcommitted and I'm not saying, even when we bought that property for the spray field, now we've eliminated the spray field, but it seems to me that that's a critical piece of that infrastructure this year because, if nothing else, because we don't know what that pond's gonna look like next year. If we have another big, or early winter or something like that,
Right.
then we're caught, blowing it out the snow blowers again.
Yes.
We've been down this road and I just think that, or at least went down this road. And, you know, if the golf course has some problems, then don't spray or, I mean.
Yeah,
We're-
understood. Sounds like you're in
I
the,
just have concerns over this, and I apologize for not bringing it up in the engineering committee, but I think that I don't want to see us, so what level of capacity are we at there now? 75%?
we're close.
Yeah, it'll be like, as Damon said, once all those projects build out, which is gonna take, it'll be, who knows? 5 years at least, probably before.
Okay, but we're not
those
even putting
projects
any
build
money
out.
into it for we're not even starting design on this biolect clear filter for 2 years.
Right, so as those projects come online, though, that's the kind of thing that, it's hard for us to plan based on prospective development.
No,
As
that's
those
what
projects-
Michael, that's what our job is.
Can I ask
No, no,
one?
I'm just saying, as those projects come online, as we receive those capacity payments, we'll be able to dedicate more resources.
Well,
to
what
that
what about
expansion.
this? I mean, why aren't we considering financing? Because we're financing all these others with the bond,
Mhm.
right? Why aren't we looking at least financing that? Because capacity piece can
We are.
pay for financing.
We are, so that's
Yep.
part of what we're looking at, because we can't self-fund all of these projects. But we have to get to, the debt ratio back to a point where we have the ability to borrow again. So that's part of what is gonna get built into the next, so the 5
Well,
year
we
plan.
just heard our debt ratio was pretty good shape. I
It is in-
mean, I hate to borrow money right now because it's so expensive.
It's in good shape for now, but we don't have a whole lot of additional borrowing capacity at this point. So as we move forward, we can add that capacity for our ability, because as I said, these projects, especially on the sewer side, the small ratepayer base that we have and the cost of these projects, we're gonna have to finance them. And we're gonna have to use multiple sources of funding to finance them. So that's what's gonna get baked into this. The fact that it was taken off of this doesn't mean we don't view it as a priority or that we aren't still gonna work to get it done.
That's correct. Or find funds to implement it.
Well,
Absolutely
I
right.
mean, fine funds, we're not gonna, I don't think there's gonna be any grant funding. Maybe, I mean, this clarifier and stuff, I'm sure there's a portion that is, that's not related to, it just needs to be replaced, right?
That's correct.
So it's not solely driven by capacity
Right.
fees. There's a
That's right.
percentage in there.
That's right, but it'll also be, that's an asset that should have a long useful life. And so financing it over a long period of time, over the life of that asset, once interest rates come back down, I think is the responsible way to fund those projects. And that's what we're gonna look at in the next few years. We just didn't want to bake all of this into pay as you go rates, because we would not be able to sustain that. So we're
Right,
not-
so I mean, some of these are not, like I don't think the spray field is rate related, probably
Right.
hardly at all. If it is, then we're already at capacity. Right?
No, you're right. You're right.
So I have a question real quick on these projects that CCWD approves and it affects capacity, most of them do. Are they given a time limit when to build, or do they start paying capacity fees at the time we approve it? And then we don't care how long it takes because they're paying
No,
fees?
that's not how it goes.
I'm asking, how does that go?
They pay when they get their building permit.
So
Yeah,
they typically pay when they get their building permit. There are some other models, and
Right.
in particular with the LGI Homes development, they're gonna pre-fund, probably in multiple phases, but the plan is for them to pre-fund a significant portion of those capacity fees using that bold financing mechanism that we've talked about before. It'll probably be coming back to the board in the next month.
So
Um,
with projects that we have approved, are there any sitting out there that haven't started construction? Do we know the time that they will, that we can know that we'll be getting money from that? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I'm probably not saying. it
Well,
properly.
no,
Yeah.
you're on the right track. I mean, the thing is, typically developers pay for their own interior infrastructure and then they pay us unless there's, like, in the case of the one, what's the name of that development across from?
North Vista Plaza, is that the one you're talking about?
Well, that's not the one, but it's next to North Vista.
Oh,
The LBI one.
yeah, LGI Homes, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
Let's
I mean,
call it
they're-
LGI Homes.
yeah.
They're gonna have to pay for, a line into the lift station by themselves, right?
They're gonna have to do some some upgrades to some of our infrastructure there. That's not a new dedicated line all the way to Huckleberry, but there's a bottleneck there that has to be addressed.
Okay, and that's something that they pay for that because it's exclusive to their development. And
Yeah.
they'll pay for all their own,
So when,
pipes in.
on the treatment portion, we're talking capacity. When do we start collecting some kind of income from these projects to help offset? You're worried about capacity for that one pond.
Well, I'm not just that. It seems like there's 3 or 4 components here that we're I kind of feel like we're leaving La Cantera and hoping that we don't develop. And I hate sending that message out there to anybody. We want investment. We need more customers, particularly sewer customers. This page, I'm not gonna approve this page. And I apologize for not being more thorough with the engineers committee, but I just want to see what our plan is at La Cantera. Even if it's, I mean, if you guys can tell me that you're confident that we're not gonna have a spill next year or even later this, month or in April. I mean,
Right.
that's just at the sewer pond.
Yeah, well, a couple things to that. I think one of them is this is an update for your review. And then another thing is, those are the kind of conversations that we have within the department when we're trying to put together a list of projects for prioritization in the CIP when they're all priorities. Trying to read the future is.
We know that I don't know how many ESFUs are we getting from the Jane Lynn School?
About 50.
About 50. Well, that's substantial. That's what is that? 500 grand?
Yeah,
Yeah, or a little more?
Yeah.
A little more than
Right around
500
there,
grand?
Yeah, it's a little more than that.
Okay, and then now the LVI homes, have we got a commitment on, all these developments are market driven.
Right.
But, we should be having a conversation with them about, look, if you guys want us to be prepared for this, because there's still undeveloped properties that can hook into our approved developments and that could hook up without it needing to do anything except pay a fee. And if Gold Creek comes online, they can start building houses immediately, and there's a good chance they can build 80. Is that about the right size?
that's close. Yep.
Okay, because they might just, whoever ends up buying that might knock it out.
Right.
So we're gonna be behind.
When's the
But
next?
can we have conversations with some of these guys about,
Yes.
look, this is we've got we need to know a little bit about timing, and we gotta be honest about what our capacity is and make sure that we don't slow anybody down.
We're having
Yep.
very detailed discussions with all of them.
Can I make a suggestion? When's the next engineering committee take place?
It's currently on the books for May 2nd.
Right, and we're not asking for approval of this.
Right, no, but,
CIP update
but I'm gonna
today.
ask that this CIP process that we're going through right now, that
Mhm.
it be brought back to the engineering committee for a deeper dive. A little bit further review and maybe stay there for two or three month session to continue to look at it. Because it does seem to be,
Well, we do need to get it approved with the budget. So we can't take that long.
right.
Unless we were to add some engineering committee meetings between now and then.
Well, I'm
Well,
not saying I
might-
won't approve some of this, but I just
And that may
need,
be
I
necessary.
needed explanation of the what the plan is for La Cantera.
Got it.
Problem.
That's what I want.
And is it possible, to have a spreadsheet that has, here's what we want in the improvement, the 5-year plan, but another spreadsheet that's, projects on the shelf or something?
That would be very, very helpful.
Absolutely.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
No
no problem.
problem.
Yeah.
It is.
No, and
It's
I've
actually, it looks something like this.
Yeah,
So we can get that to you.
A
Yeah, no
digital
problem.
copy would be great
There's like
for us if we're having our.
$115 million worth of projects that,
I think it's
Yeah,
one
like-
big
Well, I think that's
165.
important.
It was 99 million last time I saw it, and I'm
It's
sure.
about
it-
160.
165, I think.
Yeah.
Okay,
If we were to fund all the project and every, like I said, those aren't wants.
But
Those
I-
are projects.
And that's what we asked for.
but I
Yeah.
like bringing this back the way you did, the way you guys did
Yeah.
with just, these are the ones we're working on now. These is what's being
Yeah, yeah.
funded, this is where our money's going. But the second page 2 of water, page 2 of wastewater is just as important. To see what we're not funding and what
Yeah.
we're not doing.
And-
Next time this is brought back to the engineering committee and to us, that'd be very helpful.
Sure.
Yeah.
No problem.
By division.
Speaking of engineering committee, Director Thomas, go ahead.
Should we convene the meeting now? Jeff, let me ask you a question. Would it satisfy your anxiety if this 1,600,000 could be moved over into 23, 24?
Well, I think there's more components in that. We're talking about $10 million for this Violet clarifier.
Right.
Moving, 500,000 for design.
Yeah.
That doesn't cut it for me, but, and also, I mean, I don't know what our grant potential is for lock antenna. But typically we need to have it in design, right?
Yeah, so that's why we are gonna,
So I mean, we
With the
have a better
design.
chance of getting a grant if it's in design.
at least a preliminary design with environmental gives you, that's a lot of grant.
But also, we've taken out the spray field improvements, which I honestly think, when we talked about that in the engineering committee, that's irrigation. I mean, do we at least have the irrigation plan and the cost for that, or an estimate of that? I just think we need to, I'm sure you guys have that
Yeah.
figured
we do.
out.
That work is happening.
I mean, it needs to be published, and we need to look at it so people who want to develop in our county have confidence that we're going to get it done.
No problem.
Yeah, this is a great help to the engineering department to work on this. This kind of feedback is really.
Well, I apologize. I just
No.
didn't know. I mean, I've been driving around out there, this new storm that's coming up. I just think we're in for it,
Yes.
Yep. And I want to be prepared.
So do you want to have a engineering committee meeting in April?
I think you should.
Noted.
Make it
Let's
happen.
work on that with the engineering committee members.
Got it.
When's the budget due?
By
June 30th.
June, but hopefully May, late May, early June.
All right, we'll work on it more.
Got a
Um,
couple
Can't
months.
believe it's budget time again.
This may fall into the undeniably the category of painfully obvious that there's nothing on this list for a biosolids facility in Copper Rapids.
That's very
Yeah,
true.
good.
That's the next
You
page.
guys hear
Oh,
that?
that's the next page.
You don't even say those words in this room anymore.
We don't even say them in the office.
We're all the wrong.
Not there, that's a
attention.
good thing.
That's
Anything further on this review of our capital improvement project, Damon?
Well, that's
That's
just
it.
the
Okay.
sewer side. I mean, you guys, if there's anything on the water side.
We got through the sewer and the water side already.
Okay. All right, you guys, thank you, and I apologize for not being more
No,
thorough.
no, that's
Thank you,
great.
Director Davidson, for your pointing out the obvious. Old business. Moving on to any public comment on 4C, capital improvement project? We got a couple of comments. Come up to the microphone. So Ralph's got
He's got a stick and a head
He's
start.
that's that stick.
How you doing? Ralph Copeland, Copperopolis.
I know.
Gosh, it's in this last discussion. It sounds like you guys put the cart before the horse. Getting all these permits to build, and then all of a sudden you're faced with these ponds overflowing and an infrastructure that's not able to handle all this building.
No,
I think
that's not the
not
case.
true.
We have the capacity to serve those developments.
So what's he talking about is,
We will be up against the limits of our capacity at that point.
okay. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying you gotta pay more attention to the overall picture.
We do that.
It's great to have the money, it's great to have the income, and I'm speaking especially for Copperopolis too. Anyway, that's,
Ralph, I bet if you looked at it, at the full plan, you'll see that we're planning out 50 years ahead.
I understand.
That. Floods and rainfall this year, it's just put that system, just some of the limiting factors like the pond storage and spray area, but those are easy fixes. What I'm worried about is making sure that people have confidence in us that we're gonna have the planning done for, the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Go ahead, sir, come on up.
Looking at the presentation that was there, I was curious, what in the world is the difference between project cost and budget when I see 10 million for a project cost and budget 500,000?
Just what we're gonna spend that year.
Yes.
A $10 million project might go out 5 or 6 years.
Okay, so
that's like-
someplace down that spreadsheet that I couldn't see that's got
Farther
more
down.
figures that account for the
Right.
10 million. Okay,
The budgeted amount is really just the cash flow allocated to that project for that fiscal year.
okay.
Hey, I didn't get your name.
Mike Castro, sorry.
Thank you, Mike.
Mike.
Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none. Go back to old business. After action review of the December 22nd, January 23rd atmospheric river storms.
Boy,
Thank
how's this
you.
report gonna change after this?
Well, so I wanted to acknowledge that, you know, it's old business because it took a while to compile everything because we were in the middle of the February round of atmospheric river storms and snowstorms, and we're gearing up for March this next couple of days. So really just kind of from a very high level, I think the after action review goes into greater detail. We kind of identified these 9 events, these atmospheric river storms into terms of 4 different
We're
spans.
gonna have to start giving them names.
We should, right? Yeah. Well, and so in my mind, they're characterized by the unique, like, and that's kind of how I tried to convey that in the after action report. So the first one was just so much water that it's really for the district, it was characterized by round the clock lift station management, particularly in Valley Springs, the La Cantena area, our key lift station Huckleberry, Vallecito. The main lift station in Vallecito was under 24-hour watch. Copperopolis, what we call our lower cross country lift station 21. Connor Estates main lift station. And then what we call 6 mile subdivision off Highway 4 near Vallecito, which conveys sewage to City of Angels Camp. For 2 days, those were under 24-hour watch, and they could not keep up with the inflow and infiltration from the collection systems, and they couldn't push the volume out. They were starting to fill up and at risk of overflowing. So that was storm number 1. I can say that we didn't overflow as a result of the atmospheric river storms in any event. We did have a sewer line break that one could argue could be related to atmospheric river storms. It will be tough to tie that into them because there wasn't actually any subsidence of the soil. I'm kind of digressing there, but so that's storm number 1. Storm number 2 was less rain, lower snow, a lot of power fails. We were dealing with a lot of power issues in Copperopolis, particularly at the water and wastewater treatment facilities and at lift stations. So our electricians, that event, there are standby events. There might have been 2 storms during storm number 2, but we call it one standby event where we put folks on standby to address situations as they occur after hours. So generally, CCWD has 1 person on call to address any issue throughout the district after hours. During these storm events, we like to bolster that group of folks so that if we do have a system issue, we have the folks with the expertise to respond immediately. And so in the after action report, I kind of highlighted, okay, here are the folks that said, hey, sign me up for standby, pay me $100 to wait by the phone. But often what you'll see is the amount of folks that actually went out on overtime exceeded the amount of folks on standby, meaning those folks that were like, I've got I got a family function tonight, I can't take standby. They got a phone call anyway, and they went out and helped. And so it's a testament to our staff. They did a phenomenal job throughout all of these events. Number 3 was more power fails and lower snow, which actually helps in terms of water management up on the pass because it's not running off and into the ditches and the conveyance system. It's actually sitting there as snow. So that's what we hope for. And then on the 4th event, it was more of number 1, extensive rain, flooding in the Valley Springs area. We had staff throughout all of these events monitoring the bridges and the crossings for the water and wastewater piping to make sure that debris wasn't damaging our piping and causing leaks. I think there's in the presentation I have here, where I put my doohickey here, there's the picture of the famous dumpster under the bridge is in here. So we were able to corral that and bring it to you. And so, you know, I think it's kind of a testament to our staff. I mean, both the office staff and the field folks worked in concert with each other through all of these events. Any manner of issue that could have been occurring was occurring. And they continue to do so through the storms in February. If I could, in an after action review, if I could say one thing about areas of improvement that I feel are important, it's I put it on myself. Michael did an excellent job. He showed up to the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. Jesse Hampton, Plant Operations Manager, Pat Burkhart, Construction Maintenance Manager, myself, we were all there in different intervals to report out to the community countywide of whether or not we had unmet needs and responded to the unmet needs of others. So a lot of what you see in the events of number 2 and number 3 were CCWD staff providing assistance to other water and wastewater utilities. Hats off to the team. I think the criticism would be on me. I could have been out in the field more. I feel like I could, you know, I think it's very important to kind of wrap your arms around the community within an emergency, so to speak, and be available rather than stuck at I call it the cockpit, but it's my desk. Rather being stuck at the cockpit, get out into the field and get some work done with your staff. And I think that's critically important and lesson learned on these events. So here's some pictures of Berkesee and Cosgrove in the Valley Springs area. Some of y'all have seen this before, but the picture on the right, there's a little dark depression in between the two trees, and that's the top of a manhole. The manhole has a sealed lid. So ideally, you know, you don't have just unmitigated flood flow going into your collection system, but there's a manhole under there. And if something like a dumpster flows down the creek and breaks it open, then you have a serious problem at the waste treatment plant.
Just, you know, how often do we check those seals?
Every so often. So what will happen is we, for lift stations, which we have 31 around Lake Tulloch, and we have plus 40 throughout the district, we check those monthly. And then when we start to understand one of these storms is going to come through, we'll gear up our staff to go out and check the areas that we feel the storm might hit. I'll send out the weather report I receive from the county, and then staff will schedule their crews to go take a look. So
have we added that to our list of wants to elevate our problem panels?
yeah, so we're also working on the local hazard mitigation plan update, and it's in there.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So here's Big Trees Creek on the left. It flows into White Pines, and then Black Creek on the right near kind of the recreation center there on Black Creek. Just to remind everybody what the flows look like at that point in time. There's the famous dumpster on the left, which when staff.
It's pretty new.
Yeah,
I recognize it.
yeah. And then, so.
The little commercial building above it.
The Thomas Center?
Thomas Center.
Yeah. And then the image on the right is the 50 plus acres that CCWD owns off Hogan Dam Road near the strawberry patch. So
What was scary about that, or worrisome about the picture on the left of the dumpster is the pipeline next to it.
that's right.
But
yeah.
what did that end up being?
So there's a sewer line strapped about 2 feet below the top of that bridge. I am not sure still to this date, I don't know what that is. I don't know. Do you know what that is, Pat? Yeah, the one line that's next to the dumpster there, because our sewer line is like,
Right.
Strapped.
It hangs from the
Yeah.
bridge and goes parallel with the road.
not sure if that's calm or what that might be.
Yeah. It might be in the foreground and it's a shaft of a golf club, maybe.
Yeah. Some more pictures of the property there by the strawberry patch on Hogan Dam Road, about 400 feet of fencing. And it just to give you an idea of how much flood water was coming over there, just shows you all the debris in the gate and all the debris in the fence. The Vallecito crew went out there and cleaned all that debris up and piled it up just within the last couple of weeks. Atmospheric river storm, Moran Road. Here we go. The tree falling across the road. This is kind of an in situ. Got a mechanic heading up to go check on Avery Pump Station. And oh, wait, there's a tree in the middle of the road. Okay, let's get with the county, cut the tree out, go about our business. And Here's some, this is kind of the assistance to the other utilities type of work that I talk about. Utica Water and Power on the left. They had some blockages in their ditch off Candy Rock Road. Our crews went out and helped them clear those, and then they also fixed the road as they were coming back out.
Hey,
And then-
kudos for you guys and the staff for doing that. That,
Yeah, I
we
mean-
have such a great relationship now with our surrounding, utilities, and that is awesome.
Yeah, it's really great.
It hasn't always been that way, but this is awesome to see.
Yeah, I completely agree. CPUD on the left, they have this beautiful South Fork pumping plant, and it has almost kind of like a giant rainy well, and it was just full of rocks. So our folks went out there and cleared it for them. And to keep their treatment facilities back in operation, you probably have seen these before, drone pics of the Hunter's water treatment plant on the left and the Hunter's reservoir on the right, just down the hill from the treatment facility. Some metrics, we're talking about flows. Rainfall totals for Hunter's water treatment plant, 14.3 inches, December 28th through the 31st of December. So what is that, 4 days, 14.3 inches. And then for the month of January, 20.3 inches for Hunter's. And some of these metrics are just, just really ridiculous. So January of 23 for Arnold wastewater treatment plant, it had an influent flow of 6.5 million, almost 6.6 million gallons. That's double what it was in January of 22. So just massive influent flows to our facilities, and hats off to the treatment operators for working around the clock and getting really creative with coagulant doses to bring raw water turbidity down, and with finding ways to treat essentially water. Sometimes it's really hard to treat water in a wastewater treatment facility. You need some sewage so the bugs that live in the process can actually survive. And so it's been a heck of a couple months. And so then we move into February, kind of just trailing right off the after action of what we did in late December and January on into February, where it's been characterized just by extensive amounts of snow. As you all know, just snow everywhere. So this is folks on the construction crew clearing snow up near the barn up in White Pines. Here is the White Pines barn. So this is our warehouse and shop, fuel storage on the left, the shop on the right, where we have equipment, material outside, try to work to keep that clean and clear. Here's Meadowmont tank on the right, which is up in the Arnold area, and then snow removal at near White Pines on the left. This is the Arnold wastewater treatment plant. So a lot of the components are outside, and folks just crews, build trails through the snow to access the different components of the treatment facility so they can keep everything operating. This is one of the newly constructed tanks it's on Flume Court. So this tank has yet to be commissioned. It's part of the Redwood tank replacement project. So this is mitigate a hazard, replace a Redwood tank with a tank of fire resistant material. In this case, it's glass lined steel. So this tank will get commissioned here within the next week or so. There's just simply too much snow up there to open the valve, turn everything on, and ensure that we know if there's any little issue, we won't see it. It's just covered in snow. So we want to be judicious and wait a little bit. Here's a Larkspur tank site. So this tank is yet to be replaced. It's a piggyback project that sat on top of the Redwood tank replacement project. We're going to dismantle the tank in the images and put a brand new glass line bolted steel tank up. You can see the exterior condition of this tank here, and then the pump station in the image on your left. It is somewhere down maybe year 6 or 7 on the CIP to rehab that pump station, if I remember correctly. Here's just an idea of the depth of snow in West Point. So this is images on two different types of day. Could have been the same day, you know, in consideration of how the weather's been nice and clear, and then complete snowstorm with down trees. Hats off to the crew members who worked with members of the public, helping to clear access, worked with other utilities in situ like PG&E, and with the county and CHP. Here's a telecom raising the downed communication lines so they can reopen Highway 4. So we had plenty of staff. I think it was a week ago Monday, last Monday, where the highway was closed. We had some staff that were stuck up on the hill and some staff that were stuck down here. Some stayed in hotels, got stuck in this, in the highway trying to travel back and forth. So the highway opened at about 6:30 in the evening and closed again right at midnight. And so all the staff that were up on the hill were able to make it down before the closure. But it was just quite an exercise and work effort. So this is the image on the left is really interesting because I think this is traveling into Lakemont or Pine Brook. I think. You can't even really tell there's a road there. It's just, oh no, actually, take it back. That's the Forest Meadows wastewater treatment plant. So that's the driveway into a waste treatment plant. Looks like you're just on a goat trail in the forest.
Looks like the gate's closed.
Yeah, exactly.
The gate's closed.
Yeah. And then the image on the right is the West Point water treatment plant, refueling the generator. So we have staff backing up to the generator to get some fuel in there.
With red diesel.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so the story that I've been told is this CHP officer was on the highway, got out to stretch his legs, and then the next thing you know, here comes this tree. So couldn't have been more lucky. It's just been an exhausting month of February, and I think now kind of what the conversation is you know I think even the National Weather Service called it the elephant in the room on Monday, which was a rain on snow event. So we're gonna have a warm storm that could threaten to melt snow. I'm sure you've all heard 5,000 feet elevation and above, they're not as concerned with snow melt. Between 5,000 and 2,000 feet, they're very concerned, localized flooding.
So what's your expectation of the workload?
So, well, yeah, so in the last, so we did, I would say in the month of, the end of
Sophisticated
December
comment.
into January, we were right at $43,000 in standby and overtime. So I believe that in overtime, we're at least half of that. Because the end of December and kind of the middle of January, it was extensive work from many crews. And February with the snow removal, it's really been the construction crew with removal of snow and the mechanics with generator checks. So it's been less of a, not as large of a group.
I'm talking about this weekend.
Concerns are very real. We have, so we have folks coming on standby, and we've also called, so we have an on-call list, contractors, consultants, engineers that we can utilize, you know, as necessary. We've actually reached out to some septic hauling companies and just asked them, hey, are you going to be available Thursday through Sunday if we need you? Because we might tax our resources. We have 3 Vector trucks, 2 pumper trucks, but if they're all moving to pump, at the same time, we're going to need some help. And so I anticipate we could have hundreds of hours of overtime collectively through Sunday. And then from what I understand, I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to conflate everything, but it's just going to kind of keep rolling into next week as well. But that's a little bit, you know, up in the air still.
For the cost of all this, are we expecting to get some kind of FEMA funds?
Yeah, so kind of jumping back to the after action review with the metrics. Yes, we have submitted actually an initial damage estimate to FEMA for the overtime, the standby time for our staff, and for damaged infrastructure. The pictures at the beginning of the slideshow were of Indian Rock Road. It was damaged in 2019. It was damaged again. We have the intake structure to the Moke River Middle Fork Pump Station was damaged, so we have a cost estimate. We actually brought FEMA and OES out to that site to take a look in the month of January. And we have some other costs. So all told, we're at about an estimation of 174,000 in overtime and damages. So we've requested to recoup all of that. Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Damon, I have a question. The next to last page that shows a key fob entry post being fabricated,
Oh, on the ops report? Yeah.
field operations. Yeah. That looks like a
Come back into session, old business, 5A. No. Item 6, reports. Report on February 22 Operations and Engineering Department. Back to
Thank
Damon.
you, President Redderman. Appreciate it. So while all that snow removal work and all the after hours work is occurring, as we all know, staff still need to complete the routine work efforts. And so the following slides are a depiction of some of the work that was completed in the month of February for the ops and engineering department. So here's another service line replacement at Henny Court in the Rancho Calaveras area. These are ongoing and continuing. That said, with service line replacements, our utility crew is going to be moving over into the Poker Flat area for the month of March, and really working while Mazingo has kind of completed a portion of their force main from our lift station 6 to our lift station 8. They're going to break off for the month of March. We're going to jump in and work to replace the service lines there. Here's some images of work in the West Point service area, Director Cicadas area. So here we have the distribution shop. We regraded the road, cleaned that up, and the image on the right organized all the material on the inside of the shop. The shop's spiffed up and back in action. We have a new senior distribution operator up there. Doug Turner is doing a great job. Hats off to Doug.
Are we doing all this work ourselves?
This work right here. So this is KW Emerson.
Okay.
So this is the second filter installation project at the West Point Water Treatment Plant. So this is setting the grid for the slab that the filter is going to live on. Filter's set to be delivered on March 23rd. And so it's it's a Trident upflow clarification system, same filters that we have in Jenny Lind, same filter at West Point, same filters in Copperopolis. So this is all the exterior work and bending bar for the slab.
Damon, do you
Yeah.
have, are these pictures with kind of what's going on the website? So West Point people could see their tax dollars at work.
I mean, we can definitely put those up
You
on the
know, projects
website.
under
Yeah.
construction and do kind of weekly.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Yep, for sure. A little hard to see into the snow, but the slab's poured. You can see some of the piping coming up out of the ground and stubbed and ready for connections and intertie. There will be an extension to the building on the right over this filter once it's set. So we got to set the filter first, and then we can work to reestablish the building over it. Here's right outside here. So the installation of the fire line, our construction crew did a phenomenal job, coordinated with CCWD, tapped their main and ran a fire line to the shop and warehouse and installed a backflow prevention device. So you can see the image on the, oops, let me go back real quick. The image on the right is after they had set the T in the valve on the water main, which is depicted on the left prior to the work. And then this next picture shows the crew working to lay the fire line, and the image on the right is the backflow prevention device coming up out of the ground. And then it'll sit on a concrete slab. And that's the picture you see there on the right. Did a really good job, looks really clean. Hats off to the crew.
Yeah.
And then, so Director Thomas, to your question about the angle posts for the key fobs. So these fobs will sit out at the new gate at the courtyard, and that welding table was donated to the district. I believe it was either Bob Carter's or Phil McCartney's table that they donated. And I believe that's iron, right? Am I right, Pat? But it's a beast, I can tell you that. It's gonna be interesting getting it over to the new shop.
Well, it wouldn't be iron. It looks like it's concrete to me, but that system of inserts there, so you could,
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah.
could-
You know
you
what?
could
I think you're right.
you could hold your project square and
Yes.
secure.
Yep.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's on, it's on almost like rail car wheels.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you wanted to borrow.
I'd like to borrow that.
Yeah.
Well, we have them in Kent's position.
Yeah. Here's a kind of hard to see. The image is kind of to the top of the image is this is what it looks like when a blow off is, which is accidentally hit and is not blowing off, is under district supervision. And so this is a kind of a classic call out in the middle of the night. Staff head out to where a vehicle hit a air relief valve or a blow off or a fire hydrant, and they come across water flying in the air, and then they have to locate the valve, shut it down nice and slow, and then respond to any possible customer calls, because oftentimes issues like this stir up any deposited manganese in the water line. And so you're going to have calls of colored water. And so then the next effort after you fix this is to go out and flush and try to eliminate some of that naturally deposited
Do you
manganese.
get to recoup any costs to the person who caused the damage from them?
We put in requests. Sometimes they're not even there anymore. So most of the time we come out there and it's like, oh, there was a red car and we saw, you know what I mean? And
Gotcha.
but when we have the opportunity, we definitely do. And so here's another picture of, I've shown you these in the past. This is the image on the right is kind of a half of a full circle repair clamp. Not a great picture, but that's on a water line. So it's a water repair. And that black tube underneath it is the power. So this is Big Trees Village.
Wow.
Our staff have to make a repair on a water line, and the water line is sitting directly on top of
It's
the
just, it's touching.
it's touching. So we're continually back and forth with PG&E on ways that we
How
can
did-
resolve these.
How did Jared let that get passed?
You know, yeah, I'm gonna have to ask, you know, yeah, that's,
And how
So-
do they get something like that in the first place? Is because we didn't inspect it? or-
No, it would have been in the ground 25.
yeah, late 70s,
Yeah.
mid to late 70s, everything was what they call common trench a lot of the time.
So is PG&E waiting for us to move ours and we're waiting for them to move theirs?
Well, so it's a little,
The game, yeah.
it's a little bit of that. Yeah. So,
It'd be
I
nice if
mean,
We did it together.
it gets, well, so Poker Flat is similar. So we went so far as to draft a letter and, you know, oftentimes it comes down to, if you're on the bottom of the trench, that means you were there first. So, you know, we have these conversations, well, we're the deepest utility, you're sitting on top of us. And then we get into like, it just gets really cloudy. We don't have a smoking gun that says, okay, CCWD, your stuff is in. PG&E will be here in 1 year to install there. We don't have that. We look for that.
Well, what about a project where you do it together and
So
you know,
that's,
you're using the same crew making two trenches?
that's the broader conversation. That's exactly right. So then it turns into, okay, can we work together to resolve this? Yep, absolutely.
But you know, if you were to bring it to their attention and they don't respond and then an employee gets hurt working in there, then what?
Great
Meaning,
question. And we've posed
is
that
there a-
question. And so
Is there a lawsuit sitting
Well, yeah,
there?
I think it gets back to, it depends on who's responsible for it. But, yeah, because I mean, the flip side of that is we could be liable for injuries if these comes to, if it's the other way around. So there's,
But if we kept sending letters saying, let's work together and get this done, at least we would show that we're trying to.
there's been a
Yeah.
lot of correspondence.
So short term, like real time situation, you know, right now we get a call, hey, there's a water leak right next to this power. It's a situational decision. So we can call in a trouble person and they will come out and they will disconnect power at that point in time, allow us to make a repair and then reestablish power. Yeah.
Scary.
What's the facility here?
So that is, I just wanted to show you PG&E power is on
Oh,
at the new shop and warehouse. As you can see the lights on the outside of the building as we come into work in the morning. The electricians wired and ran all the lights and all the electrical boxes in the new warehouse, did a phenomenal job. Looks great.
So now we're getting it.
Yeah.
So you're leaving those lights on all night? That's,
They're on photo cell.
okay.
Nobody touches them.
How can we can't afford that?
I know. That's our anti-theft device.
Oh,
It goes along with the cameras,
All right.
strategic
good,
location.
good deal.
Well, thank you very much,
Thank you,
Damon.
Dan.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Any
You have a comment?
public comment on Damon's report?
Don Jensen, Copperopolis.
Don, can you make your way up to the microphone? Sorry about that.
Everybody can hear.
You got important people online listening in.
Don Jensen, Copperopolis. So with the storms, and we know that we got like 8 more days of rain coming right now, and that rain's warmer. As Damian mentioned, between 2,000 and 5,000 feet, it's gonna start melting snow. There's a lot there. Living in Copper onto Lake Tulloch, when the rain was at its peak, we went driving around and just, a friend of mine ended up kind of pulling stuff out of the way where pipes were going under the roadways and stuff, because with the drought, so many oak trees and so much debris has just made its way down into the gullies, and then it gets washed down. And the thing that I noticed the biggest was at Black Creek, where it goes under Copper Cove Road, that had so much debris in it, it was backing up. It was filtering through, but it was backing up and it opened up. And I don't know, is there a crew that goes and does and removes that stuff?
So generally it would be a county crew, but like we talked about, particularly in the Valley Springs area, our crews will go out and assess our water and sewer infrastructure. And if there's an issue, that we'll call the county and we'll say, hey, you got to get over to the culvert at Black Creek and whatever, you're backing up. And so it's like, okay, thanks. And they're just trying to manage those different issues.
Yeah, there's probably 4 or 5 cords of wood. Ability to get 4 or 5 cords of wood off a bunch of big oak trees. There was stuff coming down, and taking out other trees that were good trees.
Yeah.
Coming down that river when it was at its peak. So I was just wondering if that's a big issue. We noticed, like, I probably counted 45 little creeks and stuff going into Lake Tulloch, not counting the river, the regular tributary waterways. So, and we're never there before. It's coming off that flat top mountain. It's amazing to me how waterfalls can come off that flat top mountain for 4 days straight.
Yeah, right.
So,
And there's not a pond up there.
yeah. there's nothing.
Right.
But yeah, it's crazy. So anyway, it's amazing that we haven't had more issues with how bad it's really been. And that's a tribute to the crews and everybody that's been doing it. So it's really very limited issues. Muddy, the first big rains, the lake was really muddy, but now so much of the silt and mud is washed off that it's pretty much coming out clear when it's coming down now. So that much water. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment on Damon's report? Thank you, Damon.
Thank you.
Item 6B, General Manager's Report, Michael Minkler.
All right, thank you very much. And just, I echo what Damon said, except for the part where he was criticizing himself because he's, leading that whole effort. But just about how much work our crews have done and it's just been remarkable. The limited amount of damage we've sustained and interruption to service that we've experienced is only because our crews are so prepared and so good at what they do. So just can't say enough about how effective they are at preparing and managing these events that are, in some cases, we're nearing I think unprecedented gets thrown around too much, but we're on the verge of that with this winter. So it's been a little while since we had a board meeting. We had our first external relations committee meeting, went really well, and covered a range of topics, including preparing for additional town hall meetings that we're scheduling. We had a town hall meeting in Valley Springs just a few days after, the day after the last board meeting. I thought that was, I think it went really well. We had good public participation, we had good questions from the community. Director Ratterman and Director Davidson were both there that helped address those the community concerns. And, you know, I felt like it was a very effective and well-received presentation. So we have town halls scheduled in Copper and Arnold later this month. And at the recommendation of the External Relations Committee, we're adding a tour or optional tour component to those. So we're scheduling for both of those. There'll be it's limited, and so we'll see how many people we get to sign up in advance. But we'll have I think space for about 15 people that can sign up and take a tour starting at 4 o'clock, and then the town hall meeting starts at 5:30. So we're setting that up in both Copper and Arnold. I think the Copper meeting is March 20th and the Arnold meeting is March 28th. So trying to continue, you know, and in some ways, we put a lot of work into these presentations and preparing for these presentations. And so, you know, I think part of it was just capturing what we did in Valley Springs and being able to, you know, move across to the different areas of the county and use a similar presentation. So obviously tailored to those service areas. But
Listen, I gotta say, the information that you guys put together in Valley Springs was terrific and all that, but you cannot you got to be able to give the presentation and then take questions after the fact. There was so much interruption, and you know, Scott kind of kicked it off by telling people, hey, just go ahead. You know, anytime you want to ask a question. No,
Yeah.
I know, but on the agenda, it said we'll go through the presentation and then ask questions. So there was a conflict there. But I would just advise you guys in the future, say, hey, we're gonna do a, you know, 10-minute presentation. These are our 5 subjects, because people were asking about subjects that were still yet to be discussed. And their questions would have been answered had we just give them the guidelines. Look, we're gonna talk about this, this, and this. We're gonna have 10-minute presentations, and then after the presentation, because hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions in the presentation. But if we don't, then you can ask questions. I think you'll get it'll be a little more organized, and you'll get a better response, you know, and you won't have people that are jumping the gun, so to speak.
We go back and forth on that when we prepare for these things, and we
Right.
talked about it in advance. The way we worded it was we recommended that people
Yeah.
hold their questions till the end, but if people were gonna ask questions, we weren't gonna, you know, put them off.
I was going to talk about this in my presentation. I'll hold off here because I do think that made it a lot. I disagree with Director Davis, and I think it made it a lot more casual conversation with people raising their hands when it came to their mind and not having to sit on their hands. There was one time when the meters came up and we started talking about meters, and we're going to have a huge thing on meters and what it's going to look like, and even what your online bill is going to look like when we get the new stuff rolled out. But there was very, very few of those. I think had we tried to do that, and there were times to reel it back in, and actually someone in the audience reeled it back in for us once and saying, hey, let's let them do their presentation and we'll ask questions afterwards. But I think that can go both ways, and it's kind of how the room feels.
Yeah.
But it did say it on the slide, that's what we were going to try and do. However, my conversation with Michael, as it started and looking at the room, we were going to allow people to ask their questions as we went along. So it did go back and forth, but I think we read the room pretty well. And I think that overall,
I wasn't happy.
okay, well,
Yeah,
my part of it is kudos. You guys did an awesome job. I think people came there a little bit upset or had a little bit of a bone to pick. No one left that way at all.
No, the information was terrific. It just got so scattered because the presentations kept getting disturbed. And I think you know, people will be polite if you say, look, I'm gonna give you a 10-minute presentation. We'll take questions after that. And the next subject's gonna be this, and the next subject's gonna be that. I think that people will be polite and patient.
And they did, and because staff did say, we're gonna get to that in a minute. We're gonna get to that in a minute, and it actually did.
And there's a balance there. There's a
Yeah.
great dialogue because you guys are highlighting the pros and cons of either approach. One of the things I like about it is, getting that active feedback is it helps us make sure that we're on point, that we're talking about the things that are most relevant to the people that came to that
And
event.
it helps them get their question answered while they got the thought in their head.
Right.
And they're not having to write it down and say, oh, I forgot what we were talking about.
But I think, part of our work is just to keep it on track at the same time. So make sure we're allowing people.
That was a 2 hour meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think we scheduled it for
Around?
2 hours, right?
And that's too long.
So, yeah,
And they didn't have an intermission?
no intermission.
Anyhow.
Anyways,
But the beer was cold, right?
for the most part, I think it went really well. Some may disagree.
I'm sure it did.
So I think we're gonna use a similar model with adding the tour component on for the next couple of town halls. And then we're gonna work on a plan for the West Point area as well. So we're excited about those events. And we have a whole team now that, since the external affairs manager position is vacant, there's a team that's meeting on a regular basis to make sure we stay on top of, customer relations issues and other external affairs, and preparing the agenda for the external relations committee. And so I think that's going well. And we'll probably keep that team meeting on a regular basis, even when the external affairs manager position is filled. We went over to Tuolumne Utilities District. It's been an increasingly strong and beneficial mutual relationship with TUD over the last year or so. Really good working relationship with their management team. They've come here a few times, so we went over there, Damon and Stacy and I. And it's just a great kind of a sharing. We're very similar agencies. And a lot in common, a lot of the same challenges. And so being able to bounce ideas off of each other and how they're handling certain things and vice versa is really, really beneficial. So it's a good ongoing effort that we will maintain. That same day, we had a camera meeting that afternoon. And there was a lot of good discussion at camera. There was, we were talking a lot about both the MOC battery storage project, the Green Gen project that they're moving forward on, planning to file their initial preliminary application document, I believe, next year with FERC, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. So they're moving forward with that project. And then we also talked about the development on the PG&E front. PG&E is creating a subsidiary to offload 49% of their non-nuclear generation assets, which includes their hydro portfolio and includes Project 137. So that's obviously something AMRA and CAMRA both will keep a close eye on as that moves forward.
What's their, what's the mission?
The stated intent is just to generate capital and bring an investor in that can help provide capital for their infrastructure projects, which are substantial.
They're undergrounding.
Undergrounding is underway, but they have a lot of capital costs, so they're bringing in some revenue. But they maintain a controlling stake in that subsidiary, and so what the message that they've told partner agencies is, don't expect any changes. It's all gonna look the same as far as operations go, but that remains to be seen, I suppose. So there's the county has created a housing resources planning task force that we participate in, and that group was dormant for a little while, but I think it was partly because Lee Kimball at the county was doing some work on their end, and they bring utilities in to provide our input on some of the development issues in the county, where we can target development and some of the impediments to development that sometimes utilities get blamed for unfairly. So I'm glad to have a seat at that table.
Isn't that like a general plan?
It is, well, part of it is, you know, counties and cities have to do regular updates to their housing element. And their regional housing needs assessment. So I think it'll feed into that, but I think it's also part of their effort to meet their housing obligations. There's, you know, counties on the hook to provide a certain amount of housing and in different classifications. And so how to meet those housing development obligations and working with all the partners that are involved in that. So I think it's a good process and we'll continue to stay engaged on it. We also had a meeting on water use sufficiency standards. Staff have done a great job of putting together information that we've worked with other agencies on as well. So it was us, it was organized by Mountain Counties Water Resource Association. So Justin was on the call, Director Ratterman was on the call, along with CCWD staff, Amador, Georgetown Public Divide, whole NID, I think, a host of other agencies, and meeting directly with water board members to articulate the issues that are unique to mountain counties, I think, more prevalent at least, maybe not unique. When it comes to, you know, oversizing our infrastructure for fire flow, leak mitigation efforts that we do, and then the water age issue that can create, and as they tighten down water use efficiency standards, the disinfection byproducts violations that we've experienced and the struggle that we have to maintaining compliance on those water quality issues are actually exacerbated by the investments we've made into the infrastructure in some cases. And so trying to raise awareness at the water board of those issues and create some flexibility as those regulations roll out for agencies like ours that are it's gonna be a challenge on how we comply with the sometimes conflicting regulatory compliance demands.
But never seemed, and as this water use efficiency study has been going on, it never seemed like we had anybody's ear. They are certainly engaged with these members of the water board. Their consultant, a doctor, very impressive gentleman, was on the call with us, listening, asking questions, sent out a 2 or 3 page email afterwards with all the stuff that he knew to answer questions.
Oh, no, he wasn't water board. He's with El Dorado Water Agency. But he was super helpful.
Oh,
super.
was he really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he was either former water board staff or former DWR staff. I don't recall exactly which, but really sharp guy that I think is going to be helpful for our coalition and kind of honing in on the technical aspects of it and exactly the tweaks we want to see in the regulations that'll create some more flexibility for us.
And our next meeting of water use efficiency is going to be with state board staff. And dragging them into the picture too. So we're certainly engaged, and Michael's a huge part of it. And but I think it was a great call.
The water board members, you're right, have been very responsive to us, in part because one of their comments has been, you know, they're used to hearing from the same large urban agencies on a regular basis and hearing from the same agencies over and over again. And so they've been really responsive to hearing from agencies that they're not accustomed to hearing directly from. So.
No, and just to the background of it, Jessica and Larry McKinney from AWA met with them down in Aqua, and actually had 2 different meetings with water board members at the Aqua conference in Indian Wells. Impressive.
Okay, moving down the list, I'll try to wrap these up quick, but I do want to mention.
Too late for that.
We did a whole offsite management team workshop that I think went really well. Really appreciate the engagement and the genuine engagement from the whole management team. And I think there's going to be some follow-up work on that, but I think it's been a really beneficial process for us as a team. I just want to note, Congressman McClintock has started doing office hours here again. He used to do it here several years ago, and then they moved to a different location and they're back here again. And so I think they did one a couple weeks ago, have another one coming up next week, I think, but it sounds, Friday. Sounds like it'll be on a more regular basis moving forward. Damon mentioned briefly already the local hazard mitigation plan update work is already underway. Kelly Gerkensmeyer is leading that effort. It's a critical document that is what gives us access to the FEMA pre-hazard mitigation grant funding that we've been very successful in bringing in some of those grants. So the update is important, and hopefully we'll have it wrapped up by the end of the summer. Let's see, I mentioned the BOLD program already, looking for that either on the next board agenda or the one after that. That's the financing mechanism that we've talked about for developers to help pre-fund some of their development costs. And then, yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome.
Michael, you mentioned the trip that you made to Tuolumne County, but you didn't say anything about the trip that
Oh,
they
you're right, yeah.
came over to talk to us.
Sorry about that. So Tuolumne County's water agency is different than TUD, and it is the board members for Tuolumne County Water Agency are the county supervisors. They reached out to us and wanted to just give us an update on work that they've been doing recently, and talk about some of our mutual interests. And so we spent a couple hours with them, Director Edmond and Director Thomas. And I think the one item to me that really rose to the top is the shared interest that we have in watershed health and forest management, and kind of the possibility of creating, and whether it's a JPA or not, may not need to be a JPA, but an entity that will do a similar work effort that UMRA does on the McCollum watershed, but focus more on the Stanislaus watershed, which I think would be beneficial to water agencies in both counties. So that is something I hope will gain some traction. And our old friend John Mills is currently working as their general manager.
Okay, let's move on to board reports, information, future agenda items.
Get some comments.
Oh, okay, public comment on general manager's report.
Go easy on them, Ralph.
In your town halls, are you mentioning the rate study?
Yeah, we'll talk. We don't have detailed information to provide about the rate study, but we definitely are open and upfront about the fact that the process is happening.
Okay.
And
Good.
if I'm not mistaken, I think we're going to have another set of town hall meetings, do the same tour
Right.
as that gets closer.
Yeah.
That will focus on the 218 process and the rate study.
Okay, thank you.
As long as the external relations committee agrees.
No problem. Listen, been involved in a couple of town hall meetings with Mike, and in the discussion on how people ask questions, you make a choice. It doesn't go ever like you want it to go. We made a lot of attempts to keep people organized in the way they ask questions, and to raise their hands and not just yell out. I think it just kind of happens that way. People get incensed and or excited. But after the town hall meeting coming up, I want to let you know that we have made a concerted effort to let people know that it has nothing to do with biosolids. We wrote an email to everyone that is on our list, and we wrote to them saying that I'm hoping people maintain proper decorum at the meeting and it doesn't turn into a free-for-all, as the biosolid waste issue has been addressed and is no longer an issue at this time. That's not to say we don't need to do our due diligence being involved in our community. People haven't been in organized dissemination of information 9 out of 10 of them in their lives, not even in their own homes. So that being said, you could bring a paper with Robert's Rules of Order and slap it down on this and hand it out to everybody. They'd look at it and go, like, I don't even know what this means. So good luck, and we'll do our best to make sure that it goes organized.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's helpful.
Bring a stick like Ralph has. That'd be good.
You know, in some meetings, they'll put up microphones, 2 microphones to ask your questions at, and then one person, you approach the microphone and then they alternate. You get in line and one
Yeah.
person will be responsible, and then you get to ask your question at the end. and they do that with the microphones, and it works really good sometimes, so.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, with public comment on that, Cindy, back to
Yes.
board reports.
Pretty much, obviously, I'm not doing my vacation anymore, so I'm here for the month. And then for the Copperopolis Town Hall, I'd like to attend that if no other board member other than you are going. I've been to a couple of
I'm
them.
not gonna go.
That's actually.
Only two of
Getting
us
ahead
will
of
be
it.
there, is that right?
do
So
that.
I'd like to go to that if nobody
I've
else.
got a previous engagement.
I know you're going. That's really it. We'll see the, at some point at the finance committee meeting, that percentage split at some point.
Russ,
Okay, reading through the agenda and the old, in the minutes approval process, I was reminded that I brought up at that meeting, the policy on records retention, and I can't remember whether I was told that that's in progress, or are we gonna get a report on what the current thoughts are?
It's in progress. Yeah.
Okay,
I don't have a timeline on for me off the top of my head, but yeah, Rebecca's put a lot of work into it already, so we have.
okay, specifically what I'm talking about is email retention. You know, with my experience at the county, I saw how some people can come in without a policy that restricts the limit or the amount of time that we have to keep the emails. It can just get out of hand.
Yeah, we'll address that. So,
Yeah.
But we
Okay.
do have a policy for that.
yeah. We have one, but we're in the process of updating it.
Okay.
Director
right.
Davidson, anything?
No, not really.
But I also wanted to we have these representatives from Copperopolis. What degree of interest do you think we'll have about the pre-meeting tour of facilities? I would,
We got two interested ones right there.
okay, all right.
We put that up on next door Facebook and then again on, you know.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Okay, when we talked about that here before, Jesse was saying that that he thought that it would be possible to have two groups, each with 15 and, you know, two different people.
I think we would probably schedule the second one on a different day if we get that much interest.
Okay,
Yeah, we only have an hour, so we're doing one tour of 15 max.
okay.
They excluded the rest because they're, you know, you have to be able to walk on our services and climb ladders and.
All right. Sorry about the interruption.
I'm sorry.
I would just have one suggestion. If we're gonna do that 15-person tour up in Arnold, maybe we should pick the hard to get to places and take some snow shovels.
Right. Everybody grab a shovel.
Yeah. You really want to see it.
Can I add one thing, Director Admin, real quick before,
Yeah, I only have a couple things. Go ahead.
I forgot to mention one item that I think is worth mentioning. Our old friend Joel Metzger was recently awarded the John Fraser Fellowship. So he's in the Water Education Foundation's Water Leaders class and applied for and received the fellowship that will help fund his participation in that class, and it kind of puts him in a leadership role in that cohort. Brad Arnold from CCWD was in that same position a couple of years ago, but I just wanted to flag that for the board too, that Joel's doing good.
Yeah.
Awesome. I just got a couple things. CPUD's having their town hall meeting tonight on their Prop 218 water rate proposal and cost of service study at tonight. I think it's 7 at the San Andreas. It's at the San Andreas Town Hall. Not positive of the time. I won't be able to make it to the Wednesday 22nd regular board meeting here. I'll be in Sacramento. I have a JPIA property meeting in Roseville that day, and then earlier in the day, with Mountain Counties, and we're visiting Senator Alvarado Gill to kind of go over some current legislation with their office. That's all I got. And our next board meetings are Wednesday, March 22nd at 1 PM and Wednesday, April 12th at 1 PM. We're going into closed session with conference with legal counsel on one potential case. And that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We'll see you at the town hall.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for spreading the word on that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
It's really positive. Many people